Now we will see what are the factors that affect the growth of microorganisms. And it is very important actually to know these factors, because once we know these factors, then we can try to control these factors. And controlling these factors would mean that increasing the shelf life of food or making more food available for human consumption. So there are very complex reactions and conditions that are either helping the microorganisms to grow, or either they are stopping the microorganisms to grow. So that is why we need to understand that how the microorganisms thrive or how they survive in food or food products. What are the conditions that help these microorganisms to grow, and the number of microorganisms, how many number of microorganisms are there that actually can trigger these growth of these microorganisms in food in a way that they can spoil it quickly or bring about all the undesirable effects in the food. So if we talk about some of the factors, I think they are the pH, moisture, humidity, temperature, and oxygen, availability of oxygens. So these are the 5 factors that can be overall, if we can control these factors in a way that they inhibit the growth of microorganisms, or they reduce the number of microorganisms in the food, then that would be helpful to increase the shelf life of food. So talking these one by one, if we talk about pH of food, microorganisms are very much sensitive to pH. As we earlier discussed that there are kind of pH range in which bacteria would not be growing. Similarly, there would be other range that is suitable for the fungal growth or yeast growth. If we talk about most of the bacteria, they prefer to have a neutral pH. That is why most of the food that are neutral in nature, for example, meat or milk or eggs, they have a near neutral pH. So they are the most suitable food for microorganisms to grow, and that is why they have got very less shelf life. So this pH makes them very much perishable. But if you go below pH 4, that means an acidic pH, there would be many microorganisms, many of the bacteria, they would not be growing at this pH. And that is why sometimes just change in the pH would actually help in increasing the life of food. For example, milk has got a neutral pH, but when we make yogurt out of it, that is mean we are reducing the pH of the product. So that pH would not favor the growth of other microorganisms. So if food, by changing its pH from neutral to acidic in the form of making another product, that would increase the life and the useful life of that food product. So if we talk about spore former bacteria, if there is a pH less than 4.6, most of the spore forming bacteria would not grow at this pH. Because this is one of the survival mechanism of bacteria, that they would form spores, and once they make spores in food, then they cannot be destroyed by heat. That is why we need to be very careful about these spore forming bacteria, because even the higher temperature treatment of food, it would not destroy these spores, and these spores, whenever they get favorable condition, they would grow again. So that's why we need to know that what are the conditions for these spore-forming bacteria that stops them growing. So below pH 4.6, spore-forming bacteria would not grow. Similarly, bacteria are, if we talk about bacterial sensitivity, because there are different kinds of bacteria, they are more sensitive to pH than yeast and mold. Yeast and mold can grow in a wider range. Yeast, as we said, that it has got somewhat narrow range, but mold have got a wider range of pH in which it can survive. Another factor is water activity. Water activity is a measure of water that is available for microorganisms to grow. In other words, this is also related to the moisture content, how much moisture is there in food, and then how much other things. For example, salt and sugars are there that actually bind that moisture, and it makes it unavailable for microorganisms to grow. So water activity would account for all these factors, for example, the moisture content and the other things that can bind the available water for utilization of microorganisms to grow. So pure water, this pure water have got a water activity of 1. This is a figure for the pure water that means the maximum water activity, maximum possible water activity. On the other hand, the fresh fruits, they have got a water activity of 0.97. Mostly, as you know, that the fruits and vegetables, they have got very high percentage of moisture. That is why their water activity is also higher. That would mean higher amount of water that can favor the growth of many of the microorganisms. Bacteria would not grow if we have got water activity of less than 0.91. So if we go below 0.91, the bacterial growth would be stopped there. So that is why many of the food, if they are dried or if they are their water activity or water contents are reduced, they can have a very higher shelf life as compared to the food which has got available moisture in them. Yeast and mold also, but they can grow at lower pH, lower water activity as well. For example, they can grow at dried kind of products as well. So they are not as sensitive as bacteria are. The lowest amount of growth of mold is actually observed at 0.61. So 0.61 is a very low water activity. That means very dried or very less amount of moisture available within the food. So at this water activity level, the mold growth has been reported also, but this mold growth would not be so much that it would destroy or it would overcome the shelf life of food. Another factor is humidity of the environment. Humidity of environment has got again an indirect relationship with the water activity of food, because if you have got a humid environment, that would be condensing on food surface. So the water activity at food surface might increase. So water might be available at the food surface that would encourage the growth of microorganisms, and that might lead to the spoilage. And that is why most of the humid products or the humid climates, their food would be having lesser shelf life. In other relatively humid storage conditions, like for example in a refrigerator, there are chances that the surface spoilage, it might take place. In order to avoid this phenomenon, for example, we can see this spoilage in case of many products, maybe fruits or vegetables, or their end products like purees and jams, etc., or flour. If we can have the suitable packaging materials that cover the surface of food, that can increase the shelf life of such foods. So the effect of environmental humidity can be reduced if we have got suitable packaging materials. And that is why we use packaging materials in most of the cases, because they protect the food from environmental effects, and most predominantly this humidity of the environment. Another factor is temperature. Microorganisms are sensitive to temperatures. They have got their own desirable range of temperature in which they grow. This is a crucial factor. If we talk about these microbial growth, it is reported at minus 34 degrees C, and it is also reported at high temperature, for example, at 90 degrees C. So this is an extreme range basically. In minus 34 degrees C, there would be not all of the bacteria, but some of the specialized microorganisms can even grow at minus 34 degrees C, which is a very low temperature, by the way. And 90 degrees C again is near to boiling temperature. Even at these high temperatures, there are still microorganisms that can thrive, and they can grow at this kind of temperature as well. The microorganisms can be divided into three classes on the basis of this temperature affinity. They can be either classified as psychrophiles, the cyclophilic bacteria or cyclophilic microorganisms grow at a lower temperature. They can even grow at refrigeration or freezing temperatures. They can even grow at less than 0 degrees C, but their optimum growth is at 10 degrees C. So they prefer the lower temperatures for their growth. On the other hand, the mesophilic bacteria, they need intermediate temperatures, for example, 20 to 30 degrees C, at which they prefer to grow, and this is their desirable temperature range in which they grow. Then we have thermophilic bacteria or thermophilic other microorganisms that can grow at 30 to 40 degrees C. So this is the optimum temperature in which these microorganisms can grow. So this information is useful because as we see that if we can understand the microorganism that is involved in the particular spillage of food, then we can change the temperature in a way, whether we can reduce the temperature or increase the temperature in a way that it makes the conditions unfavorable for the growth of microorganism. So that action would be increasing the shelf life of food, and on the other hand, this would be reducing the number of microorganisms, or it would be stopping the growth of these microorganisms in food. The fifth factor is the oxygen availability. Most of the microorganisms, they are affected by the presence of environmental oxygen in their surroundings. On that basis, they can be classified as aerobic bacteria, anaerobic bacteria, or facultative anaerobic bacteria. The anaerobic bacteria are the microorganisms that need oxygen for their growth. So if we can exclude the oxygen from environment, they would not be able to grow in that kind of foods. And similarly, these anaerobic bacteria, they can grow in the situation in which there is no oxygen available. They can grow in the absence of oxygen as well. Then there is a third class called as facultative anaerobic bacteria. They can grow with oxygen or without oxygen as well. So they can grow in both conditions. They are adaptable to all these kind of situations in which their growth can take place. So again, knowing the oxygen affinity or the requirement of oxygen for the growth of these microorganisms, we can change the condition in a way that it helps to increase shelf life of food and reduce the growth of microorganisms or reduce the number of pathogens or spoilage microorganisms in food. So these 5 factors are the main things that need to be controlled, that need to be considered for preservation of food or for the control of these microorganisms, and we have to classify on that basis that these variable factors, that what kind of microorganisms we are talking about, what are serious for toxicity or the safety issues, what are serious for spoilage issues, and this is how we can use this information basically for preservation or shelf life increase of food. Thank you.